Hello and welcome to this week's Property Matters, the show that brings global industry trends to an Irish audience. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host today is Carol Talon and myself, Brian Fox.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Now, we're going to get stuck straight in today. We're delighted to be joined by William Power, Director of C&W O'Brien Architects, with us today. William, thank you so much for being with us today. I know there's lots of things we want to talk about, but just before we came on air, we were just talking about the growth in C&W O'Brien. So where are you now with the firm?
Yeah, so over the past year, we've gone from 25 to 50, so it's huge growth. Huge growth, yeah, and I suppose welcomed. It's always good to see demand for what we're doing, but I suppose going with that as well, there's the management side of it, so it brings its challenges. And yeah, it's been good. We've recently just renovated our office, so we've expanded to include another floor. Which gives us enough space for another maybe 30 to 40 people, hopefully.
And tell me, William, what's driving the change? I mean, is this solely attributable to contract wins?
Yes, and on the other side, I suppose what we're here today to talk about is kind of modern methods of construction. We've seen a fast increase in people coming in our door to ask about that, which is great because it's kind of driving new things into the industry. Kind of comes on the back. We worked hard over the last few years to kind of move into the digitization of what we do. So like everything is built in 3D now so we can test it, and that kind of leads into modern methods as well, because it's kind of similar in that it's trying to modernize an industry, trying to get rid of waste and all of these other things that are there at the moment.
Yeah, and look, we know that this is an industry that really is in need of innovation, and that's not all necessarily digitisation, but there's huge change needed. And over the past year, every week on the show we actually talk about modern methods of construction, PropTech, some of the new technologies coming down, and one of the things that has really come on our radar a lot has been modular. And I know yourself and the team at C&W O'Brien Architects, you're really leading the charge in terms of modular construction, but I think it's something that's quite misunderstood. So you might just kind of take us back to basics and explain what exactly that is.
Yeah, so I suppose modular is just another method of a wider part of the industry called, I suppose now, modern methods of construction. So this is the idea that we kind of look outside of construction as well to like the car manufacturing industry and go, okay, they seem to have made it very efficient, so what can we pull from there to actually make the construction industry more efficient? Because it's got a bad rep over the last, I suppose, 15 to 20 years in terms of being wasteful.
But it hasn't kept pace with innovation, and I think look, the clue is very much in what you say there, car manufacturing, as in it's the manufacturing element of the process.
So part of this move, I suppose, is to look at why are we building all of this on site? Is there a need? We're kind of pulling people from the regions in vans of 4 and 5 people. They're driving into town with all of their tools and clogging up the place. So is there a better way of doing it? Can we actually look and move manufacturing out and bring jobs back to the regions as well? Like where there seems to be a lot of talk about, I suppose the one that I seen yesterday was the dog food factory closing in Arklow. So Arklow is primed for this. Like it has access to the motorway, it has the docks. So like even if you want to look at export, like if we can get this right, I suppose there's massive potential there, even from outside of Ireland, not just inside.
And what is the attitude then to that change in relation to
it varies. We've a lot of people coming in, and you get the guys that are coming in very enthusiastic, like, so they see it as a way of modernising the industry, and they're hate to say easy sell, but they've already bought into it, so they're coming in with their eyes open. And then naturally the other end of that scale, you get guys that are very sceptical of it, and I suppose maybe rightly so, because whenever something new happens, there's that learning curve, and there's a higher risk, I suppose, of something.
And then the consumer, what's their reaction to it like? I mean, are they reacting positively to it, or it's sort of a new?
It is new. It's hard to tell yet, I suppose, because it is so new. But I think the ultimate goal here is that if it's done right and things are put in place, that the consumer walking into a new 2-bed apartment shouldn't know how it's built. They should be able to trust in that it's built right and to the relevant and current standards, but they shouldn't be able to tell that, oh, that's a modular system, or that's built with precast concrete or
Yeah.
in situ concrete. It should.
This is quite reminiscent of, maybe 2 decades ago when we were having the conversation about block built versus timber framed
yes.
homes. And, the same thing, there was maybe some reputational issues to overcome, but the reality is, and the real test of this is, as you say, that you don't know when you're from the outside and from the inside of the buildings, that you shouldn't really be able to tell the method of construction unless that's by design.
And I remember walking into timber frames back the early 2000s, and there was still a lot of resistance even at that time to it. And you walk in and you'd see guys coming in to look at homes to buy them, and they're knocking on the walls to figure out whether it's light or it's heavy. And I suppose as it moved on, then like even as energy regulations got tighter, the block built houses, they started to have to look at lining them, so everyone got confused then because they didn't know what was what. But typically they couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Once it was built properly, I suppose.
And that's essentially that's essentially the outcome that you want from modular construction.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, what are the real benefits? Because again, I know that cost has been one of the controversial issues around this, and there's been some kind of misconceptions around that the cost of delivery is lower, when actually that only works if the entire supply chain is working with you on it. So what does make offsite and modular building an attractive proposition for property developers?
I suppose everyone naturally gets drawn into the money side of it, but I let other experts talk to that. We're, I suppose, architects by nature, so costs, we won't say we don't worry about them, but we try get the best out of a product, I suppose, for our clients. But I suppose everyone's quite aware, I think, that we're at a time where we're nearly full employment. I think the construction industry, like many others, they're finding it hard to attract new people in. And I suppose when you're trying to compete with the likes of Google and these guys who have lovely offices now, nice warm offices, subsidised food and everything throughout the whole year, trying to convince someone to come out to a cold, damp site is hard. So I suppose trying to move as much of that as possible into a factory setting where you can actually create environments where people actually do want to come in. It is, I suppose, one of the big benefits is that it might open up the industry, I suppose, to more people. I suppose we spoke about subcontractors driving up from, like, I suppose if you look at the M11, the M7, M8, all of these new fancy motorways, in the morning they're clogged with vans coming in towards Dublin or going towards Cork. So there's no reason why the likes of, I suppose, Carlow, Arklow, all of these regional towns couldn't have factories set up where people are actually driving half an hour rather than an hour and a half.
Some manufacturing plants. But then I suppose in terms of labour, surely it's a very different proposition. So the same skill set that's delivering buildings on site, is that the same skill set that's going to be delivering in factories?
Typically, I would say yes. They're constructed in a slightly different way, but at the end of the day, it's the plumber who puts in the piping into these. It's the electricians that come in and do the wiring of them, and it's the partition guys that come in and do the plastering and all of the stuff. The same guys. It's the same guy that's making the kitchen for these is the same guy that walks onto a site or into a house to do it. So typically we're looking at the same types of people. I think what you're looking at, though, I suppose there's probably an element where it needs to be more controlled, or that it is more controlled. So there's probably a higher degree when you come up through the management of the process.
I presume that there's a implication there in terms of health and safety as well.
Yeah, health and safety is an interesting one. I suppose we recently had the pleasure of being brought over to Poland to see a modular factory over there. And as it turns out, when we were in there, they were manufacturing the modules for the new Marriott Hotel in New York. I think everyone has seen it now at this
Which
stage.
Would be the largest modular, or the tallest modular tower. Is that still correct?
It is, yeah. I think if from reading the papers or seeing what's online. But the interesting one on that is when we were walking through that factory, like, they were pointing out modules that were going on the 35th, 36th floor. They were making them at that stage, and guys were putting glass into frames and sealing them up while standing on the ground. So they weren't 30, 40 stories up. They were actually standing on the ground. So, like, in terms of health and safety, like there's massive wins there.
I suppose
trying
they're
to make it safer.
far faster to build those than what we're used to.
Yeah, it's I suppose it's
More
it's
economical.
faster. Let's say if you looked at the whole project, you probably have the same man hours, but what you're doing is taking an element. So you're taking the finishing. So from when you're doing partitions and finishing out, putting the kitchens in, you're taking that and you're moving it forward. So when the guy goes out to put the shovel in the ground to start digging the foundation, what you've got is you've got guys in a factory somewhere that are starting to create modules and to put finishes in. So you're taking a chunk of time, moving it forward, and the saving then is that you actually get the end product, the building, quicker and faster.
Okay, and in terms of this already being delivered, are you working on modular projects right now?
Yeah, so we spent a bit of time looking at it, and you kind of, because I suppose there's concentration around the volumetric side of it at the moment, but when you look at it, when you go back to the 2D aspects of off-site construction, like we've been doing precast concrete for a long time. Timber frame is another method of modular construction as well. So like we've a couple of jobs on that would be combinations. So there'd be precast concrete and pods, and then we've a hotel site out at the end of the M50 there, a new Holiday Inn that's added in. So it's a unitized facade. So it's made, the facade is curtain wall and cement board, and it's made in units down in Limerick. So they make it in units, put it on a lorry, transport it up, and it's lifted in. So the time on site is cut dramatically in terms of.
Can I just
working
ask?
site.
I haven't heard that unitized facade.
Unitized, yeah.
What does that mean?
It's so typically if you were looking at a facade, you'd have windows maybe in brick and maybe timber board or something like that. So what would happen is someone would come into site and they would put in the components individually, whereas a unitized facade is broke down into modules. So it's broke down, if you take a grid maybe on it, and each module is made independently, so they might be 3 meters by 3 meters, brought up, and they're lifted into place, bolted in, and then finished. That's the finished product.
Oh, okay, right. So, right, but then in terms of modular, we know that there's been a huge increase in Ireland, and I know one of the things that's happening in 2020 is that there's a new Offsite and Modular Institute being established in Ireland.
Yeah, so I suppose, as I was saying earlier, we've had a lot of interest coming in the door. So we had a lot of people coming in, and we were finding ourselves you're constantly doing meetings talking about the interest in it. So what we did, and thanks to yourself, you were a host at our event just back about 2 months ago. So we just said we'd get everyone into a room and we'd try disseminate the information when everyone was in there. And one of the things that came out of that was this concept for an Offsite and Modular Institute. So we just last week we sent out a survey, so we're just looking at the results of that. So we're trying to gauge what the industry wants in terms of that. It's probably looking like something, a body that can represent the manufacturers, and as well to get the information out across about what's happening. So we're looking to kind of launch that maybe in Q1 next year, try get it up and running, and try get the information.
And are there many people looking to get involved in it, or what's the reaction to it?
Yeah,
like?
we were pleasantly surprised by the amount of people coming in. I think a lot of people can see the potential for it.
Of course. Yeah.
And yeah, so like we've a lot of interest coming in, and next year we'll.
And is that
no doubt we
Irish
can get
or international or combination?
Yeah, mainly we're concentrating on the Irish element of it.
Yeah.
There are bodies in the UK that are doing similar things, and I know there's been a lot of push from the UK government. They recently appointed Mark Farmer as their rep for
That's right. Actually, Mark Farmer of Cast Consultancy, that we've referenced here many times before, his really seminal report back in 2016, I think, Modernise or Die, and then it
catchy
was
title.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was one that was very stark, but it was a real call to arms for the industry.
Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, the Housing Minister in the UK appointed Mark Farmer. In fact, he got an honorary doctorate along with it, but he's been appointed as a special advisor, and PropTech Advisory Board has been appointed. And in fact, it's something that our own Housing Minister has been made aware of.
Yeah. So
just in relation to the institute, how just in terms of our neighbours in the UK, are they more advanced in using it?
I think they probably are. They're slightly ahead of us. I think they are because naturally there's a bigger market there, so there's been an interest and demand for it for a long time. Like I think if you look at the likes of Tide Construction and John Fleming, like if you look at what he's been doing, like he's what 40 stories now in Croydon building modular. So you're kind of. It's not that it hasn't been done before. Like it has been tried and tested. It's probably just new to Ireland. So,
but I think he wouldn't be as slow, I suppose, or sceptical to react as it is here at the moment. That's the impression. Is that a right or wrong impression to get from you?
I think. I think they probably have the same issues. I think no matter where you go, I think when you look at.
I have to say, I got pulled up on this because I actually asked the question, or I almost made the assumption as the UK ahead of Ireland on this, and it was rightly pointed out to me that actually it's an Irishman leading the charge in Ireland or in the UK. So I got pulled up on that, and in fact, about a year or two ago, I was speaking with some consultants in this area, and one of the things that was pointed out was that actually before the crash, Ireland was actually leading the charge in terms of offsite construction, and I suppose had the crash not come when it did, and if that momentum had continued, then in fact Ireland would probably be the European leaders in this. So actually the expertise has been in Ireland, and a lot of what we're seeing executed across Europe and outside of Europe, there's a lot of Irish expertise gone in there. So I'm not sure if it's fair to say that, certainly implementation across the UK, that's outstripping Ireland, no doubt. But so a lot of that is actually being driven by Irish firms and Irish manufacturers, and manufacturers in the UK led by Irish people.
Yeah. So I think even when you look past that, there's a lot past, I suppose, John as well. There's a lot of heavy hitters in the top of the construction industry in the UK that are Irish or of Irish backgrounds. I think it's just we're builders, I think, by nature.
You see the same across Western Australia. You see it kind of in many pockets of the world globally. But I suppose looking to the Irish market, what is the potential of modular construction? And I mean, even looking ahead to 2020, are you expecting to see a higher take-up?
We're starting to see it grow, I suppose. But we're looking at the first large scale apartment development next year in Cookstown. So it's 196 apartments being fully volumetric. So like they'll be delivered to site. It comes back to an advantage. It's in an area under the flight path for Baldonnel. So like the ability to be able to come in and limit the time that the cranes are up is a massive benefit for the guys in there. Okay,
so look, I think 2020 is going to be an interesting year, and with the creation of the Offsite and Modular Institute, is there still time for people to get involved in that?
There definitely is, yeah.
Great. How can they get more information on it?
I think if you get in touch, if you have a look at our website, cwoarchitects.ie, and just get in touch with us through that, we'll come back to you.
Super, thanks. So, William, thank you so much for coming with us. That was William Power, Director of C&W O'Brien Architects. And we're going to take a quick break now, and after the break we'll be chatting to Diarmuid Healy, Technical Director at Curtins. So stay tuned.
Dublin South FM.
Oh, will you look at them go? I wish I had their energy.
They're good for the soul though, aren't they? I can't imagine life without Lucky. But he might outlive me yet.
Oh, well, take my advice and sign up for a Dogs Trust Canine Care card. It's completely free, and it's given me such peace of mind since I did.
What's that?
Well, it's simple, really. It means if you pass away before Lucky, Dogs Trust will take him in and give him the care and love he needs until they match him with the perfect forever home.
That sounds terrific. How much did you say it costs?
It doesn't cost a cent.
Great. How do I sign up?
Just text CARE to 50100 and they'll call you with more information. Or you can go to dogstrust.ie.
Well, that's wonderful advice. I'll do that right away. Here, Lucky. Good boy.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
And you're very welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tallon and myself, Brian Fox. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Our next guest now in studio is Diarmuid Healy, Technical Director at Curtins. So Diarmuid, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Just let's have a look at your background. You moved from London about 3 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, just over about 3.5 years ago. So I originally joined Curtins in 2005 as a student in our Edinburgh office, and had a fantastic time. Following summer I went to the London office, got to know some of the guys there, and then after graduation I eventually rejoined our London office, worked there for about 8 years.
Did you? Really? Yeah.
And then suppose I married to an Irish woman, and she eventually
brought you back.
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, tell us your experience though in London, and maybe you compare it to what you're seeing in Dublin. But just I'd be interested to know what your experience in London was like.
I found it really fascinating when I first relocated, because it was a total shift in how I was used to working. So in the UK, everything is very much kind of focused towards design and build form of contracts, and that's really starting to emerge in Ireland at the moment. But there's still a huge presence of traditional form of contracts. So we found when we first established, there was a big opportunity to come in and help contractors approach things from a D&B point of view.
That was when you first established in Ireland.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth pointing out that when you first established the Dublin office, it was quite a lonely office, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Were you on your own? Was there a very small team?
It was a really exciting and kind of fast-paced period. Essentially, we made a decision about 4 years ago.
Just when you first came back?
When I was based in London.
Oh, based in, excuse me. Yeah.
That there was an opportunity to open up a Dublin office. So we did a business plan, we put it forward to our board, and within a very kind of quick period, we had full board approval and massive support from a team in the UK. And I think it was the 1st of September 2016, kind of arrived in an office in just off Fitzwilliam Square.
And tell me, had they looked at Ireland in the past? Or was it you that brought their interest to, the Irish interest to them?
So Curtins as a business, we're about 60 years old. We've got 13 offices in the UK, and Dublin is our first international office. But every office that we've opened has been organic and true opportunities given to individual members of staff. So, for example, we opened up an office about over 30 years ago in the Lake Districts, and that was opened because one of the staff members in Liverpool at the time was really interested in hill walking and rock climbing, and he wanted to be closer to his passion, so he asked could he open up an office. And what's really exciting about the Lake District office in Kendal is, it's a sleepy enough town. It's kind of you could put it on a par with somewhere like Kinsale, but this year is the first year where we'll do more than £1 million turnover in that region, and that's incredibly exciting. It's run by a young dynamic guy called Andy Roberts, and he took over the reins there about 4 or 5 years ago. And
so how many people will be in that team?
There's about, I think Andy's got a team of 15, but
so they're an important employer in the area as well.
Absolutely. And just last year we upgraded our offices and moved from kind of a space that needed quite a bit of renovation to a not far off grade A office space, and that's a great kind of boost for the guys in that area. It's
a show of strength as well, and a commitment to an area as well when an office upgrades like that. So is that what inspired you to put forward the Irish business case? It was a number of things. So I remember returning to Dublin I suppose every few months to see family and friends, and totally settled and really enjoying London and the pace of the city. London's a fantastic city for Irish people. There's huge examples of success stories of people who've been there in the past, from Ray O'Rourke, Patsy Byrne, Peter Rice and whatnot. And as an Irish person in London, you can do very well. And I suppose I was happy and content, and I remember returning about 4 years ago and walking down the docks and looking at all the planning permissions that are now built out. Yeah. And the cranes as well, it just...
Well, back then, when we were doing our business plan, there was 30 cranes, part of the Irish Times survey up there. I think there's over 100 now.
Yeah.
In the same council, we've kind of caught that wave of growth. But what was really, really important to me is anything I do, I have to truly believe in it. And I remember coming back from that weekend feeling really convinced that there's something going to kick off here. And this was about 2015.
Can I bring another angle into this now at the moment? Because you're speaking very optimistic about Ireland at the time. Had the Brexit referendum gone through at that point?
No, so we had full board approval in February 16.
Right.
And honestly, the first time Brexit kind of started coming on the radar for me was around March, April. I remember sitting around.
So very shortly after.
I remember sitting around a table with a topic piece, and someone raised it about Brexit, and I kind of go, "Ooh, this could actually happen." People were talking in its favour, and I was very fortunate. Immediately the day after the referendum, I remember. Obviously voting for Remain. I felt that was going to be the best for the Irish economy. If the UK sneezes, we tend to catch a cold. Mm-hmm. So I wanted things to be piping as strong as possible. Yeah. But I got a call from our CEO, Rob Melling, immediately after it, and he made it very clear that we were always going to go, and we're absolutely even more determined to go. So really felt very fortunate. But one of the really important things that I've had in my favour is prior to opening up the Dublin office, the last office we opened was 26 years prior, and that was opened by by a guy called Rob Melling, who's now our CEO. And
so there hadn't been any new offices or any expansion?
It was 11 offices for the longest time, and we've opened up 3 offices since, which is Glasgow, Dublin and Cambridge.
Okay.
And but we've been quite fortunate. So Rob Melling opened up the Edinburgh office about 29 years ago, and he had been through all the teething problems, the pain, and so very, very patient guy, understood it's not going to happen overnight. And was incredibly supportive.
Again, I suppose.
But were you given a time frame to get Dublin kind of up on its feet?
I wasn't given a time frame, but I kind of knew myself that there, everything has to stack up financially and whatnot.
But again, I think the construction industry in Ireland, it's a small industry, and I think maybe people don't realise just how small it is. And relationships tend to be very strong, which makes it very difficult for new entrants coming in. So generally when new entrants come into the market, it's because they have broken away from a larger employer, but the relationships come with them. You weren't doing that. When you moved to Dublin, you were essentially starting from scratch.
A newbie.
Yeah, so it was quite an
and nervous, I'd imagine, too. Having been given the stamp of approval by your CEO, Rob, and now you're entering into this arena where there's all this nervousness about going forward.
Well, there's a lot of emotions, but nerves definitely weren't one. There was a huge amount of excitement and energy, which there still is. So I remember, day one, turning up to the office, and our IT crew had been over the week earlier. We'd a small serviced office, probably no bigger than this room, and 3 PCs hooked up, a server in the corner and a printer. And I remember just putting my bag down and turning around and just getting out there. Yeah. On our second day, funnily enough, I attended a conference in Engineers Ireland titled How to Win Work. And I met a guy at that who eventually gave us our first project, which
That's so Irish, isn't it? I love this.
Which was in modular construction.
So your very first project in Ireland, because obviously you've heard the discussion we've just had with William Power, C&W O'Brien Architects. So we've just been talking about the potential for modular, and maybe, have projects been happening on the ground? So obviously you're doing projects at the moment.
Yeah, so I was quite fortunate. I worked on a couple of modular projects when I was based in our London office. The most notable was probably Wilson House for Imperial College, which was 300 apartments in a very sensitive conservation area in South Kensington. The project was a really interesting success, and I remember working on that project and other modular projects at the time, and not really probably recognising that this is very new and innovative technology. To me, it was just another way of...
It was just how you did business.
Constructing a building. When I landed back and we found ourselves with a modular project in London, I was used to be surrounded by a team, 5 or 6 very talented engineers who worked in the team. when we won this project, I looked around and it was just myself.
But also in terms of supply chain, I presume in the UK you had a very well established supply chain.
In terms of delivering?
Yeah. And people to work with.
Yeah, so we do operate as one single business, one single profit centre. So it's very easy to call upon resources. So, I mean, one of the elements to our success so far has been, we started with myself as an individual. We had a huge team working behind the scenes, and I was able to call upon resources. So we're about 16 strong in our Dublin office at the moment.
So you've grown from 1 to 16 over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Excellent.
There was points in this year where there was 22, 23 of us, if you factored in people who were on secondment from the UK sitting in our office, contractors assisting us with detailing. I mean, if you came into our office, you'll see we've got 4 PCs all set up just beside our printer, and that's for people to remote in from another office and directly access our server. Because our model sizes are so large, it's the most efficient way for the guys to work. And you know, we've worked on some really large, fast-paced projects since we've established, and we certainly couldn't have done that without immense and immediate support from our offices on the other side of the Irish Sea. And I've been quite fortunate because I've been with Curtins for over 10 years. I know everyone on a personal level. You can have very quick and direct conversations where say we really need help here, and that cuts the other way. So we had tremendous support from our London office at points during the summer. Our London office now need a little bit of support. I'm the first person to put my hand up to say, you know, I don't know what our guys are doing in January, February, but for sure you can take one of them and help you out on that aspect of that project, because you know they've been so helpful.
So, but that kind of sharing of resources means you get to tap in, obviously, to a whole bank of expertise that maybe not all similar firms and similar sized firms in Dublin would have.
Absolutely.
What sectors are you working across at the moment?
So, as a business, we pretty much work in every sector.
But in your Dublin office? In
the Dublin office, so health, housing and education are big sectors for us. So from a housing point of view, we're doing just shy of 300 modular apartments with Dublin City Council, which is going on site. It's very exciting. We're doing just shy of 200 modular apartments out in Cookstown, where we're working with CW O'Brien. In education, we're doing a few projects for University College Cork. Some are just finishing off on site. Tyndall Phase 3, which is the refurbishment of a listed building. We're doing an ultra-low vibration laboratory down in University College Cork for an incredibly innovative guy called Seamus Davies, who eventually will be inventing new materials from that laboratory.
New materials as in?
So he has effectively an Irish guy who has invented a process and a technique for being able to identify if a material has got advantageous properties. A process in the past, I understand, that would have taken months and months. He's been able to short circuit that down to days using sophisticated and sensitive equipment that we're currently trying to house in University College Cork in what will be a not the first of its kind, but there's one in the UK and one in the States.
Are we talking about construction materials?
No, we're talking about materials, everything from silicone chips to more kind of high-tech aspects than construction. Yeah.
Interesting. So that's quite a specialist sector. And I know one of the things that you brought with you from your experience across the UK would have been maybe a more advanced level of digitisation of this process. So we were talking there about different accreditations, and it's something we've covered many times here on the show. But you operate under Kite Mark accreditation?
Yeah, so we're very proud to say that we as a business are Kite Mark accredited in the space of BIM, and we've had that for the last couple of years. So Kite Mark accreditation is the highest accolade you can get, and I think when we received it at the time, we were one of 2 businesses in the UK. I'm not sure where we sat in Ireland. I was researching. Jones Engineering have just received it in the past few months, and I think we're going to see a lot more businesses.
This is an Irish accreditation.
It's kind of recognised Ireland, UK, worldwide. It means you can go into any one of our offices, look at any one of our job folders, and everything is in line with BIM processes. And that's not about fancy fancy 3D models. That's about, is everything saved in the right location from a QMS, a quality management system point of view, right down to are all the drawings and sketches labelled correctly.
You know, when we talk about different standards and accreditations, it's really important to see how does that translate into benefits for your clients. So what can you do then, I suppose, or what kind of efficiencies can you offer?
I guess it's a very definite way of communicating to a client that we do have the best of standards in our business, and we're not just talking about what we're planning to do. It's as a snapshot in time, we are doing it. I would say our technicians and engineers are very proud to have that accreditation and are looking to drive it on. And
how important is it for buyers
I would
to
say
see that?
Very important. So if you are a client for Curtins and we're operating on your project, you can be sure that everything is managed correctly in terms of data flows, and also you can be certain that if someone got sick or ill or hit by a bus or whatever we say, that the next engineers working on that project will immediately be able to pick things up.
So continuity is ensured.
It's everything is following an exact process that we work incredibly hard to maintain.
Okay, well that actually links us back into one of the topics that I really want to get into detail with you, which is modular construction. So we're going to take a short break now, but after the break we'll be discussing more with Diarmuid. Stay tuned.
This is Dublin South FM.
Hey guys, that's Katie.
And that's Kira.
And we're the presenters of our new show, No Filter, here on Dublin South FM.
Tune in every Thursday from 8 p.m. to hear two gals, one ox, and a bit of goss.
Keep up to date with us on our Instagram at No Filter Radio Dublin.
Don't forget, that's every Thursday at 8 p.m. You better be there.
Bye, pals.
8 o'clock Saturday nights on Dublin South 93.9 FM means Pop Gear with me, legendary drag queen Veda, and
me, Ian,
my straight mate Ian. It's a show for people who think that the coolest thing about a car is a car radio. We love classic pop, so if you love classic pop, join us every Saturday night at 8 o'clock
on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
FM? I'm so FM.
Your community radio for South Dublin. This is Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters here on Dublin South FM with Carol Talon and myself, Brian Fox. In studio with us still is Diarmuid Healy, Technical Director at Curtins. Now, before with the break, Diarmuid, we were talking a lot about modular. Tell us any unexpected things that happened to you when you first came to Dublin in relation to this.
So I would say any time we embark on a new modular project with a new client, the first question we always ask is why modular?
Yeah. And
we're always interested to see what their answer is.
Do people come to you requesting modular, or is that just one of the solutions put forward?
We're finding we're getting a lot of inquiries just specifically related to modular, and that's on the back of the real experience that we have. You tend to gain a lot of scars from working on modular. There's quite a few things that can go wrong, and they will go wrong if you don't have that past experience. So we're always trying to improve ourselves, the design teams around us, to ensure that the next project is building on the last one, making sure growing success.
You and I had a conversation recently, and I was really surprised when you said to me that your first hour of a consultation with somebody who proposes a modular construction project is almost to spend an hour talking them out.
It's not.
Have I paraphrased incorrectly there?
Well, I would, if I've given that impression, I'd certainly roll back on it. But one thing we would always do with a new client is understand why they're choosing modular. Everyone waxes lyrical about the benefits of modular. What we like to do is focus on the things that could potentially go wrong and identify what those solutions would be along the process. And
what kind of things can go wrong?
Well, the big difference with modular construction and traditional construction is you're typically looking at giving 70 or 80% of the package to a subcontractor, which is the manufacturer. And so you'd have the main contractor, the wrap, who's just coming in and doing potentially the substructure, but having to take more risk than they would expect if the project is delayed in the factory. then it's ultimately on their head.
Are they essentially assuming risk for things that are outside of their control, if 70% of it's going to be outside of their control?
Well, I think what we would say, in order for a modular project to be really successful, the main contractor and the subcontractor really has to work hand in glove.
So they have to trust each other, in other words.
Absolutely. And I think what's really exciting about the industry at the moment, particularly in Ireland, is there's a lot of collaborations going on at the moment. So BAM have recently taken a interest in MHI, Modern Homes Ireland, and that's really exciting. So there's
and there's many examples of that both in Ireland and the UK.
Correct.
But is this as good as it sounds? Like a cynic might say that's one way of essentially it's a form of insurance for your supply chain. It's a form of insurance for the pipeline to ensure that you're being pushed up in terms of priority.
Yeah, I think there's too many things that can go wrong, and there's too many opportunities for finger pointing to take place on any construction site.
Passing the buck.
If there's not absolute collaboration, and not just from the site side, but from the engagement with the client through all the members of the design team, that's one of the biggest challenges that we face. So one of the big blockers we're finding that we're trying to break down is the planning application system. So if one of the main drivers for using modular construction is speed. You want to get
absolutely. That's what I'm.
Bedrooms open.
Yeah.
So if you're putting an application through the SHD process, and you're not factoring in the fundamentals of modular construction, you might think you are, but you might not be truly considering where the crane's going to be located. What's my temporary work strategy? Have I allowed for modules that are transportable? Have I allowed for wall build-ups between rooms?
How does that compare? Because I was going to ask you that in the first part. How does that compare to what you experienced in the UK in relation to modular construction? How good are we at that in getting the local authorities and so forth on board?
So I think we're getting a lot better. I would say the challenge with the planning system here isn't with the local authorities. It's with the design teams at an early stage. If the developer wishes to go modular at the next stage, they need to develop a planning application that is fully modularized. Yeah. So we've worked on several projects post-planning that were intended to be modular, but when you actually got into the detail, you realize that if you take a two modules side by side, you've got a part between, say, co-living units, you can get down to wall build-ups which are 250. That's 2 layers of plasterboard, 90mm stud, a 20mm gap, and exactly the same. That's 250. But if you've got a planning application which is squeezed in between a red line boundary, giving you X amount of units, and it's based on a wall thickness of 150, and that could be on minimum co-living units which must be 3 metres wide. You're then shrinking that down less than 3 metres, so you're suddenly hitting all these roadblocks.
But then you're into non-compliance territory.
Then you're going back into, and we've seen it so many times where you then are looking at reapplications.
Yeah.
So going back into planning, going through another 16-week process when you could just be on site, and if the end game is to build this quickly, plan it correctly in the first instance.
So you must have to do a lot of overseeing, a lot of managing from that point of view.
At a very early stage. Yeah, we would find that while the architect is the lead consultant, we would work very closely with the architect to ensure that the structural zones are incorporated. But not just that, where the crane's going to go. We've worked on some schemes in the past where it ticks every box from a modular point of view. It's fantastic, but there's no opportunities to put in a crane. And when you can see, it's one of the most costly aspects of a modular installation is this crane going to cost you X amount per week? How many weeks you need it? Because of the reach, you have to upgrade to a 350-ton crane. That's going to cost you an extra few grand and whatnot. So it's trying to capture all those principles so that when it does land on the modular manufacturer's table, they're looking at it going, this is fantastic. We really want to price this, and we're really going to work hard on the numbers and give you best value. And when we talk about is modular construction cost effective, the scenarios where we've seen it isn't cost effective is when they're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. If everything is modular and considered at that early stage, and you utilise and capture the benefits, that's where you're going to get the value, not just in programme and prelims, but also matching like for like with cost.
So I suppose what I'm taking from what you're saying there is that actually the benefits really only materialise if every part of the chain knows what's happening, if everybody is expert in doing their element of a modular build.
So what we found that's an unrealistic aspiration to have in 2019 and 2020 because it's such a new and innovative new
so
concept.
What's the solution? Do we need to get the design team on board earlier, or do the design team need greater expertise in this?
It's a bit of both. So there's a responsibility on the client to make a decision early. If they do feel that they want to go down this route, they need to call it.
You mean early as in pre-planning?
Pre-planning. They need to make that decision, and it's not just pre-planning. It's before the design team gets stuck into the planning application. Otherwise there'll be abortive work. They need to make that call. Do they want to go down this route? Then there's a responsibility on the design team to, if they haven't worked with modular before, they need to work hard to do their research to make sure that they do have the structural zones, the wall build-ups. They do think about the temporary works, the craneage. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment, Carol, is we are entering into design teams as a modular consultant. So there's already a civil and structural engineer working on the project, doing a fantastic job, taking care of the transportation issues, the civil issues, all the fundamentals for a planning application. We're coming in, working collaboratively with them, educating them to some degree. And for sure, the next project, I believe they'll be able to go off and
know how to work it
knowing how to do it, and that's fine with us because we're that's kind of how we operate as a business. We're always keen to open source. I think there's going to be plenty of work to go around. And we're just excited to be at the table.
The learning seems to be maybe what's missing out of the Irish marketplace at the moment. Now, I know earlier we had William Power in from C&W O'Brien Architects talking about the Offsite and Modular Institute. So it sounds like maybe this is the right time for a shared learning. But do we have the basis of that? Do we have the expertise in Ireland? Do we have enough expertise to be able to share it at this stage?
I think we have enough expertise for people to be able to ensure that planning applications that are going in will be modularised. I think if these schemes are going to be built out in modular, it does need people who have been there and done that. I can give you, examples of things that, one of the things we're finding in modular construction is 3 or 4 years ago, you would model the steel frame where a beam would come to a column and it would be an infinitely small node. As soon as that goes to the steel fabricator, which is traditionally at quite a late stage, he would put a connection on that, and that connection would have fin plates and bolts, all the things that you'd expect. But how does that impact buildability in the factory? And if you're not thinking about that at an early stage, you're not realising the costs. But it's not just that. If you're not thinking about the connections with the architect at an early stage, when everything is fully designed, fully coordinated, you'll find that a fin plate is sticking out of the floor that's not fire protected. So what do? You either reposition the column, or you change the connection detail. So one of the ways that we've tried to short circuit that is for the past 20, 30 years in the UK, we've been working directly for precast concrete subcontractors doing the detailed design and fabrication drawings, thinking about, setting out lifting eyes, rebar, millimetre perfect, putting colours of panels, of concrete panels on drawings, tremendous amount of detail. And we're starting to apply that knowledge to the modular space where we are producing detailed design of connections which would ordinarily be done by a fabricator in-house. We're producing fabrication drawings in-house, and we are having difficult conversations with architects at the right stage to say, actually, I think that column needs to move, or you need to allow for that connection.
So the detail has already been taken care of then?
The detail is done, so there's no surprises when it hits site. And that's so important with modular construction, because if you've gone through your coordination element and suddenly the fabricator gets involved and you have to hit one more iteration, it's supposed to be fast-paced, but suddenly everyone, hold up a second, we need to recheck this, and we're not sure where it might occur again. So we're, if I could show you one of our Revit models for one of our modular buildings, it's the level of detail which we're showing it. Every bolt is modelled versus what we were doing a few years ago, which is where the majority of the industry now is just producing information up to construction stage, but not fabrication stage. And there's a huge jump to the next one, which we're excited to be on.
Okay, yeah. When you get into that level of detail, you can see how really the learning needs to be at such an the learning needs to be across the industry, but that the decision-making process at an early stage is so crucial. So, right, all of these things align, right? Say we get all of these in order. You're well placed to actually talk about the real benefits then at a project level, because I know 50% of the projects you're doing through your Dublin office are modular builds.
Correct.
So let's kind of get away from the theoretical. What are the real tangible benefits for projects that you've been involved in that you can see of modular construction over traditional?
Well, can I turn it a different way and tell you what the negatives might be?
Okay.
So there's
you're definitely a glass half empty kind of guy.
No, I'm glass half full, but I think there's going to be no shortage of people who will tell you everything that is amazing about modular and volumetric, and I shouted from the rooftops. But if you look at what's really exciting about the Dublin and Cork market at the moment, so that everything's getting a little bit taller. We're going up to exceeding 20 floors, going up to 30 floors. If you take a 30-storey building down in Euston Station and you were to do that traditional versus modular, the structural depths, if you were doing it traditional, I believe should be about 200 mil. In modular, you'll struggle to get it less than 350. So that's an extra 150 mil of structure for 30 floors. And that works out at a building that's 4.5 metres taller. You could put an extra floor if you did a traditional. Now, so
suddenly the cost savings of getting this right, or the margin in terms of for an additional floor, suddenly.
Well, that's a major. I would say that's a major disadvantage of modular construction, is you've got buildings that are fundamentally taller. But one of the benefits, when I was in London 7-8 years ago, I was fortunate enough to get a tour of the Shard just as Byrne Brothers were topping out, and afterwards Patsy Byrne talked about innovation, and there's loads of innovations on that tall building, on how they had the core going up driven by very talented slip form driver. But he said the biggest innovations they had on that project was actually how they could put a woolly hat under the hard hats. And that, because of health and safety, you couldn't previously do that. But the guys were up on 30th, 40th floor, and they couldn't stand it because it was so cold in there. The driving winds, the hard hats were flying off. So they overcame that constraint, what they described as real innovation. But if you built that in modular, you wouldn't have guys working in the cold on the 30th floor. You'd have them in a factory environment, listening to the radio. Very, favourable conditions from a health and safety point of view. So there's one major positive, and but floor to ceilings and structural height is certainly a negative, which we always work incredibly hard to overcome and ensure projects are a success for our clients.
Okay, but we've covered a lot of the negatives, what can go wrong, and the importance of experience and expertise across the supply chain. But can you tell me some of the benefits or that you've seen on the projects here in Ireland?
I think all the the key benefits are all around health and safety, cost, program, but they're all predicated on early planning and not trying to shoehorn it into a scheme that isn't suitable for modular. So I would describe it as the future, where it's going to be very difficult for us to get the next generation of workers to work on wet and cold building sites, that from one project to the next, their commute changes from 30 minutes to 1.5 hours, and vice versa.
They're going to get more used to the modular idea.
Before we let you go, I really need to reference something that you told me about before. So very briefly, you mentioned that there was a project, a school project, where it was 34 classrooms were installed on site. And after 4 years?
There's a huge emphasis around, everyone is trying to kind of get out of people's mindsets that modular construction is temporary. There's a fantastic example of a school that was constructed 4 years ago in North Dublin, 50 modules, that has since been moved to County Meath after 4 years. The regulations changed, it was upgraded from thermal properties to fire, but that's one facet of most modular businesses, hire and sales, and that's proving to be a very sustainable side of the industry as well, which we should celebrate.
Yeah, and that's something that we might get into in greater detail on another day. But before we let you go, I know you've launched a new service, Modularize. So where can people go to find information about this?
So that's kind of a service due to popular demand, I would say, where we're working on a number of projects in the UK and Ireland, where we're brought in as modular consultants to ensure that projects go through planning, efficient for modular. And it's something that you're going to hear more about in 2020.
Great. Where can people go to your website?
Yep. www.curtins.com.
Great, thank you.
And that was Diarmuid Healy, Technical Director at Curtins. So thank you so much, Diarmuid, for joining us today. You can get in touch with the show by emailing hello@iPropertyRadio.com or on Twitter at iPropertyRadio.
Okay, that's it from us in studio today. We'd like to thank our guests for joining us here, and also thanks to producer Katie Talon and Adam and Peter on sound today. We're back at the same time next week for our final show of the year with outspoken property developer Michael O'Flynn. But for now, from Brian Fox and myself, Carol Talon, have a great week.
And a great Christmas.